If you look through the pages of the Old Testament and the New Testament, you read of great stories, acts of bravery and feats of great marvel, and many things that can't really be put down into words, of the many exploits of God's people throughout time. All starting back in the days of Adam and Eve, and the times of Moses and the children of Israel, all the way forward into the times when the Lord walked the earth, and the adventures of Paul and the disciples. So many of those adventures are difficult to put down as a type of teaching, because most of them involved walking out something of God, something of a reality that had never been really done before. The book of Hebrews talks about how some of the early Christians, survived many things that they had to go through, and they were sawn in two and resurrected from the dead, and a lot of things happened. And so we're going to talk about an adventure that the children of light are having during this time. This is a story of the sons of God. You can put your name into this story, or our grandsons, Ayden and Sawyer. We can put their name into this story, because this is a story that is unfolding every day. It's a story and a book that is being written by each of God's sons and daughters during these last days upon the earth, while the earth is in the throes of tremendous change. We know that there is warfare in the heavens, and the sons of God are being prepared for their release into their inheritance as the mighty warriors that God has raised them up to be. Now, this story has to do with the light. For as you know, the sons of God are the children of light, even as the word says, their Father, our Father, is the Father of lights. And so much of the battle that the sons of God face during this day is that of overcoming the darkness and the evil that has so infiltrated the earth. Unbeknownst to the sons of God in the days of their youth, they knew not how great a bearer of the light that they were and are. But as the sons have begun to mature, whether they're young children as Ayden and Sawyer, or one as aged as myself and Anne, you come to the place where you begin to realize that you are the bearer of the light. Even in the book of John, it speaks when the Lord came and the light that came into the earth. And of course we read how the darkness was confounded and could not understand the light. Even so, the sons of God confound the evil in the earth, because there is no ability to understand the light. The darkness flees. And so, as bearers of the light, something's been happening to God's sons and daughters, something so deeply mystical, so deeply hidden that even the sons themselves have not really been that aware of it. You know, it's one thing to open the book, read a few chapters of something and look at it and say, yes, that really sounds amazing, and I do believe that. But it's another when you yourself are the book, which the sons are, and as they open their hearts, and as God opens them up and brings them forth, they realize that they are the light themselves, even as the Father is the Father of lights, the Father of the children of lights. What is happening now is so beyond the understanding of mankind, because the light has come into the earth on such a plane that it is confounding the mighty. The sons of light are indeed the bearers of the light, and wherever they go, their presence exudes the light, and whatever they touch, the very light of their presence leaves a imprint. It's almost like if you can remember the story of Peter Pan and Tinkerbell, and wherever Tinkerbell would flitter, she would leave a little bit of that fairy dust just glittering here, glittering there. And so it is with the sons, not so much the fairy dust, but the light itself. The light itself is deposited here and there, and wherever their presence goes, their deposit of light is left in their wake. In this one story, the Lord has appeared to the sons and said it's time to change what's happening on the face of the earth, for the darkness is attempting to overtake the light, which of course we know it cannot. And so, in this story, Ayden and Sawyer have been given a direct command. And that command is, go be the weavers of the light. Ayden looked at Sawyer and said, what is a weaver of the light? Neither of them understood just what the Lord was saying. But as they pondered more and more, they began to realize that everywhere they went, every place their foot was placed, every word they spoke, everything they touched, left a residue of the light. And to those who were open to the light, that light would actually enter those people and begin to bring a whole new ability to see and understand and perceive. And the Lord said to Ayden and Sawyer, and their grandmother as well, we'll have to put her into this, because it's all family. Go out and weave for me a blanket of light and place it over the earth. And so Ayden and Sawyer and their grandmother went out. They sat down and they said, how do we do such a thing? How do we weave a blanket of light? And what is a blanket of light? And as they spoke, a vision appeared, and they saw strands of light like fine thread given to them. Spools and spools of it, which spools would be like a big thing with a whole bunch on it. And they were given these spools of light and said, go weave for me a blanket of fine light and place it over the earth. And so Ayden and Sawyer and their grandmother thought, well, what type of machine do we have to get to weave a blanket of light? And the Lord said, you don't need a machine to weave a blanket of light, for you are the machine. Well, that was kind of interesting. How do you put that into perspective? You don't. What does that really mean? Who knows? But as the three of them began to interact and talk, magically something was beginning to happen. The cords of light, the threads of light that each one of those were, began to come together. And the cord that was an infusion of the light threads of Ayden and the light threads of Sawyer and their grandmother began to come together. And the more they interacted, and the more they waited before God, and the more they worshipped, and the more they pondered, this blanket began to come into shape and focus, and it began to have substance. And before you knew it, this massive blanket of light emerged, so brilliant that you could really barely lay your eyes upon it. In fact, it kind of reminds me in the book of Revelations when Christ sent one of his servants who appeared to John, and the light was so radiant that he could barely cast his gaze upon him. So bright was the light. And the Lord spoke, remember Daniel, for the prophecy in Daniel is that they that have the insight will shine as the brightness of the firmament. And that shine had to do with the very depth of the light that was emanating from those three. And the light strands began to emerge. In fact, the more they spoke, it almost didn't matter what they spoke. They didn't have to try to be something. And that is a problem for a lot of people. Everyone's always trying to be something or measure up, especially if the call of God is on their life and they're like, okay, how do I do it, Lord? How do I manifest? How do I be? And the Lord just says, you are. You don't have to struggle to be or struggle to do. You just are. And as you speak, the light emerges. And it comes out and it begins to weave. In this case, it happened to weave a beautiful blanket, so radiant that you could barely cast your eyes upon it. And so, with this dialogue that the three of them had, they began to realize on a level they had never really gone on before, that as bearers of the light, that it's the same thing as the Lord Jesus Christ and the Father himself, because it's all light, and everything that they are is light. And so they shouldn't be surprised as the darkness would attempt to come against them, that all they had to do was to stand and be the light, and the darkness had to flee. But if there was that element that was maybe a little fearful, a little concerned, a little, trepidation, then the light would dim, and the darkness could give them a little bit of a challenge. But the minute they realized, no, I am the light, the darkness had nothing to do but to run and so the darkness has run from them. What is interesting, though, in this time in the earth, when great darkness is attempting to overtake the earth and has been affecting a great deal of evil, this cloak of light is beginning to cover the face of the earth. And that cloak of light represents even the word itself being spoken to such a degree that the light is beginning to cast out the darkness. But it's only just begun. We're only at the beginning of this story, because this story is going to unfold and evolve as the light begins to gain more and more dominance within the hearts and minds of the sons themselves. As the sons really realize that they are the light and have always been the light, even as Christ is the light, then everything changes. Everything changes. And that would be the adventure that Ayden and Sawyer and grandmother are on. It's a discovery of the light. And as they discover the light within them, their relationship and knowledge of the Lord and of all of his creation goes hand in hand. The blanket that was woven of pure strands of light is just the beginning. I have a feeling the Lord has a lot of things that he wants sewed. In fact, he might have to get him a special machine, but of course we know that they don't use machines. That means God will just have to equip them a little bit more to handle the great demand that he's going to put upon them. Because a great deal of light is being released into the earth. For a long time, the darkness thought it had won. The darkness thought it had put down the light with the deception and illusion and lies that had been flowing into the earth for the last several decades. But that is not the case. The light is gaining strength and gaining preeminence. And the light is beginning to overtake the darkness. And it absolutely doesn't make any sense to try and understand this story unless you're baptized into it yourself. But that's what's happening to the sons. Everything is ceasing to be a theory, an idea, and it's beginning to become very grassroots, very personal to each of God's sons who've been called to be the light. And that will end this short story. We have many stories to go into. This is only just to set the stage, because Ayden and Sawyer have some major adventures facing them. But first, it was good to review this story about the light, because the light is growing strong, both within their hearts and the hearts of God's sons, and in the earth. And with that, we'll talk next time and continue this story.